In his sessions at the temple, Dr. Parinja aims to describe ways in which we can progress spiritually. He will look at the overlap between spiritual practices recommended in Hindu scriptures such as Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and so on, and scientific findings of modern neuroscience to develop a spiritual framework which withstands some of the scrutiny of science. The discussion will include stories to illustrate concepts, scriptures, and science findings. We, the Hindu Temple and Heritage Hall of Toledo, and our committee aim to have 5 total sessions. This will be the first session. Is going to last approximately 30 minutes, introduction, and we will have 4 more subsequent sessions. They will last for approximately an hour. After his introduction or introductory session, we will have some time, so Dr. Parinja will answer if we have questions about his introduction. Without further ado, without further delay, I welcome Dr. Rajiv Parinja.
Thank you, Panditji. So, as Panditji said, I have practiced as a psychiatrist, and when we see patients who are in distress and who are suffering, we often treat them with evidence-based interventions such as therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and those have been studied and found to be helpful. Now, science is investigating spiritual practices which have come from different religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and has found that they can be helpful. And I think that there is a lot of merit to combining those, and you can get a lot more benefit. But you know, when I'm practicing with patients, I'm very limited in what I can do because I have to follow evidence-based guidelines. But I think there is a lot of depth and benefit from Hindu spirituality, which I hope to be able to talk, because this is a temple, and you know, we can talk about Hinduism. And to get started and to define the challenge that we have in Hinduism, I'm going to take 2 tasks. So the first task is very simple, and in taking these 2 tasks, I'm going to look at why we are all not so much more spiritually advanced, why as a culture we are not all you know, essentially enlightened near what they call moksha. So the first task is very easy. I want you to guess for me the name of something which is tangible. It is something which is easily available at a grocery store. It is something that you all have seen and experienced. To guess what it is, I want you to ask me a few questions. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but you will know. And when you know, then you will keep it in your mind, but not say it until everybody knows. So that thing that I'm talking about can be found in a grocery store. Do you have a question for me to help you know better what it might be? Anybody? Yes?
Banana. Objects.
No, I don't want you to guess the answer.
Okay.
I want you to ask me a question so that you know the answer. When you know the answer, you will keep it to yourself until everybody knows the answer, and then I'll tell you what it is.
Is it edible?
It is edible.
Is it solid or liquid?
It is a liquid.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It can be sweet, it can be a little sour sometimes. Tends to be, I think most people think of it as sour. Anyone else?
Does it come from plant or animal?
It comes from a plant.
What color?
The color is orange. If you know the answer, you can keep it to yourself and just raise your hand.
Sweet and sour.
Okay. Anyone who doesn't know the answer, any more questions from me? Any questions for me to, everybody knows the answer? Yeah. So, what is the answer?
Orange juice.
Orange juice. Orange juice. So, this was not hard. This was easy. Everybody got to know the answer. And why was it so easy? It was easy because that object is very clearly defined. It is physically present. We have all seen it. We have all tasted it. We have all experienced it. It is commonly available. And there is no two ways about it. There is no confusion about what it might be or what it might not be. So that is easy. The challenge in Hinduism is that the core principle, the core definition of God is less tangible. It is less tangible. It cannot be defined. So again, let's ask a few more questions about this second task that is not easy to define, and you're going to ask me some questions about it, and I'm going to try to answer them to the best of my ability, but it is going to be a little difficult. So, any questions about what I'm talking about? So for the sake of argument, think of it as a fruit, but ask me about it. No, you not the answer. You have to ask me like something about it so you get to know it. It is not really a fruit, but ask me about it.
Where can it be found?
People disagree about where it can be found. Some say it is somewhere, some say it is everywhere, some say that it is not really anywhere, some say it is inside of you, so there is not any agreement on what it is.
Where did it come from?
That is a difficult question. Some say it has always been there. It will always be there. It is there before we came, before humans came, and it will be there even when the universe ends.
That's what that is.
Does it
That's
have
what
a
it is.
shape?
Some say that it takes shape when it wants to. It manifests itself when it wants to. But some say that it is shapeless, formless, and it creates the shapes that we see around us. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just came, so this is out of context, I apologize. But if it cannot be defined, how do you know it exists?
We don't. Some say it does not exist. Some say that this is all a kind of delusion that those people who follow religion seem to get into, but others say that it is probably something that can be found and we must work towards it. And there are those who say that they have experienced it and the experience is very real. The experience is, again, very hard to define. Some say the experience is one of extreme euphoria. Others say the experience is one of bliss, which is incomparable with anything else that they have experienced. And those who have experienced it for long enough say that when you have found it, it feels like you have found nothing. Any other questions? I'll punch that over. What I'm talking about, of course, is the concept of God in Hinduism. Because that concept is so hard to contain, when we talk about orange juice, we say it's orange, it's liquid, it's sour, it has a particular color, it is tangible, defined, so we can all understand it. Why is it so hard to understand God? That is because there is no comparable experience. The experience that we have normally, that we share with other people, that is the ordinary experience. We have words for it. To understand God, words don't apply because words cannot capture the complexity, diffuseness, depth of what that experience is. Which is why to get close to this experience, the Hindu scriptures, they have made a number of recommendations. This is what you do, this is what you do, this may get you there. And to illustrate those concepts, they use stories. There are a lot of stories, and I'll talk about a couple of stories today. Those stories lead you in that direction, but there is no guarantee that a story will get you to that state of communion with God. And what I'm going to talk about today a little bit is some of the recommendations that have been made in Hinduism over the ages that allow us to get close to this experience. Prayer. We come to the temple, we pray. Prayer can get us close to this experience of God. But prayer is not essential. And in itself, it may not be sufficient. But it gets us there. It gets us closer. Meditation. Meditation has been prescribed in various scriptures. There are various ways of meditation. We control our attention and we try and get closer. There are those who say you are meditating for years and months. There are those who say that meditation works faster. Who knows? Meditation gets you closer, but meditation is not essential. And in itself, it may not be sufficient to get you there. Reading scriptures. You can read scriptures, you can read the Bhagavad Gita, you can read the Vedas, you can read other things. There are the Upanishads, you can read Vasishtha Yoga. That will get you close to that experience, but it may not get you there completely. It is not essential to read the scriptures. Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans was illiterate. His pupil, Swami Vivekananda, was an intellectual giant. But he was the guru, and Swami Vivekananda was the pupil. So reading scriptures is, again, it is not essential, and it may get you there, but it may not. In the Bhagavad Gita, they define other methods which are all considered a part of yoga. Karma yoga is when they say you do your work diligently, dutifully, without the expectation of reward, without trying to get something for yourself. That will make you progress spiritually. But that is not the only path. It is not essential to do it. And in itself, it may not be sufficient. It may be, but it may not be. The next thing that is defined in the Gita is Gyan Yoga, or they spell it differently. Gyan is the knowledge. It is the knowledge of the reality and the unreality as it is defined in Hinduism. The reality is that what we see around us is a manifestation made by God using his magic called Maya. That is what we are experiencing. But Maya is a veil. It is not real. And when we have true communion with God, we are able to pierce through the Maya disappears, and we see God alone. But Gyan Yoga, again, is not essential, and by itself, it may or may not be sufficient. It is not sufficient, but it may be. The Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures also define bhakti. They call it bhakti yoga. Bhakti is a sense of devotion and love for God. You feel it as an emotion. You feel a sense of longing. You want God. And when you spend your time in bhakti, you become close to God. And that again is not essential. You can find God without bhakti, and in itself, it may not be sufficient. They say that you have to do bhakti, but they also say that bhakti comes to you through God. So the love of God that you experience is created by God through you for him. So it is again God in action not you. And this concept is applicable not just to bhakti, but to all the actions that we or anybody else might do. Finally, I have just put yoga in there. Of course, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga are all forms of yoga, but there is, Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold path, which has many different concepts in which there is meditation, there's yam, niyams, and it is a discipline. If you follow it, they say that you will become closer to God, but again, it is not essential. And in itself, it may or may not be sufficient. So I've said so many things which can lead you closer to God. None of them is essential. None of them may be sufficient in itself. So you might ask me, what is it that is essential and is sufficient to get us there? To answer that question, the English word for that is grace. I think grace is used more in Christianity, but this is when the God has us in His good graces, when He wants us, He has His blessings towards us, then we are able to find God, get closer to God. This is essential. Cannot do without it. You can do all the other things, but if you don't have grace, then we don't get closer to God. And this in itself is sufficient. This is all you need. There are people who will do very little in terms of prayer, but they seem to progress spiritually and have this experience of oneness and communion with God for reasons we don't understand. There are people who say, well, it must be the fruit of good karma, maybe in their previous lifetime, we don't know. What is it that we can do to improve our chances of having grace so that we have that opportunity to have that communion with God? Of course, we can go back and do all of these things. They get us closer and they make us have a better opportunity. But one of the difficulties in finding grace is what in Sanskrit is called ahankar. Aham is me, and that me-ness or I-ness that I have. Because the experience of God, when you have it, is one where you, the universe around you, and God are not any different. When the Maya disappears, we are one with God. But how can you be one with God when you are you? You are I. I-ness. When my ahankar is high, that is created by Maya, then that communion is not available to me because I am separate from the rest of the world. And you will not find grace when you are full of ahankar, ego, when you have a strong sense of I-ness, when you are proud of yourself. To get close to grace, you would have to find humility. Humility in the knowledge that all those wonderful things that we do, that we take credit for. Look at me. I am highly educated. I have accomplished much. I earn good money. I have a big house. My children are doing so well. They are such good children. That's all good. Those things are not bad. They are even good for your mental health when you feel that way. But when you see the reality for what it is, everything that I do, that I was able to do, was made possible by forces outside of me on which I did not have control. I was born in a country which allowed me the opportunity for an education. I had good health that allowed me to do the work that I did. Then I see reality a little differently. That allows me to move from a sense of pride in what I did to a sense of gratitude for the world that I live in for the opportunities I had, to humility. When the humility is overpowering, overwhelming, and complete, the I-ness becomes small, it disappears, and that is when I have grace and I have the opportunity of having this communion. So this is the first session that I'm doing. This is an introductory session. I want to capture the challenge of making progress spiritually in the core Hindu concept of spirituality. I want to emphasize that, the things that we tend to do are often different from the things we need to do for spiritual progress, and spiritual progress can be counterintuitive. In the sessions that we go forward with, the next 4 sessions, we are going to define spirituality. We are going to look at the techniques of meditation that are described in the Hindu scriptures. And we are going to look at the scientific study of some of those techniques, which shows that there are measurable changes in the brain and measurable changes in our emotional reactivity and behavior from those activities. So now we have neuroscience, we have neuroimaging, which can actually study that. We have captured the difficulty of progress, and we are going to take stories which are a core feature of Hindu teachings, stories to illustrate how we make this progress. And in the last session, or we'll see how we go, I'm going to use the neuroscience and spirituality to see how we communicate with the people around us, so that we can communicate not with distress, anger, but with compassion and humility in a way that allows us to connect with what Hinduism defines as the reality of our existence, which is that I and you and God are not any different. That experience is difficult to attain and very difficult to hold on to even when you experience it. It comes and it goes. How can we stay in that experience when we are communicating, and what are the benefits of that? So we'll look at that, some of the challenges. So this is taken from Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, and just to illustrate the point I was making, it says, hard it is to pierce the veil divine of the various shows which hide me, yet they who worship me pierce it and pass beyond. This is Sri Krishna telling Arjuna this. And it says here, again, the same chapter, this is an earlier verse. Blind are the eyes which deem the unmanifested, which is God, manifest, not comprehending me in my true self. This is Sri Krishna saying this. Imperishable, viewless, undeclared, hidden behind the magic veil of shows, which is what we are seeing around us. So there was another verse there. And in the next session, I'm going to focus on this. So this verse, which I have read many times, it captures, in a way that I find hard to comprehend, the challenge of psychology. It says, if one ponders on the objects of sense, there springs attraction. We want it. This wanting is a very powerful part of who we are. From attraction grows desire. Desire flames to fierce passion. Passion breeds recklessness. Then memory, all betrayed, lets noble purpose go and saps the mind till purpose, mind, and man are all undone. I am, a large part of my work is addiction psychiatry, and in these sort of 5-6 lines, they have captured the challenge of the patients that we see. Objects of sense, what you want, you desire them. When you don't get what is desired, it creates a passion. The passion takes over your being and leads to recklessness. Your memory is taken over. You seem to not remember all the good things that happen when you are away from the things that you're passionate about. And it seems that the things that you want are very good for you when they're not. And when your memory is betrayed, you let that noble purpose, the right things that you need to do, you let them go till everything is undone. So, the wisdom of the scriptures of Hinduism is profound. It is not accessible easily to everybody because it is a little counterintuitive, and of course we get distracted by the Maya. The culture that we live in now is one of achievement. Do this and feel good. Do this, feel good. That's not all harmful, but it does take us away and puts us at risk in some ways of problems. It takes us away from the spirituality which Hinduism defines and prescribes. So I'll stop here. This is an introductory session. We will hope to do 4 more sessions. In those sessions, I will interleave science with Hindu scripture principles, Hindu scripture principles, because we are trying to move towards spiritual progress. We looked at how difficult it is because what we are going after is just not that defined. There isn't a ladder that you can climb, like you can climb a ladder in your career to get there. Some people get it by reading scriptures, that works. Some people get it by prayer, you can do all kinds of things. But when you get closer, it gets less and less tangible. To me, it makes sense if there is a scientific content to it. Again, to a lot of people, they don't need science to get there. But science can get us closer, and when we are closer, hopefully, as they say, even your progress to spirituality is not caused by you, but it is caused by God, who acts through you to create that desire within you to get you there. And when we get there, hopefully, the rest of the way, God will pull us. I'll stop here. Thank you. Any questions?
Why does the passion lead to recklessness? Passion,
Yes.
reckless.
Yes.
Why that happens?
So this is how we are built. When we want something very badly, the urge to have it becomes very strong. And when that urge becomes strong, the things that impede it, that get in the way, we don't like them, we don't want them, and we become reckless. We are willing to destroy them so we can get what we want. This is the design of nature within us. So for example, I tell my residents that if you ever find yourself in a situation where a patient is threatening to hurt you, that is almost inevitably going to be an addict who is not getting the drugs they want from you. So that passion, that desire for the drugs is so strong. And again, this system is designed to help us because I would imagine that, thousands of years ago, most of the time, you were wanting food, which was essential for survival. But that system of the brain which makes us want things which are good for us, now has available to it chemically produced things like various drugs, which stimulate it in a way that is completely artificial, which leads to a recklessness which would not have happened in a more benign sort of environment for which we are adapted, if that makes sense.
But passion is not always reckless. Like a passion to, let's say, invent the vaccine for coronavirus.
Yes.
That passion led to the discovery of, vaccination.
That's absolutely right. So I think this is a translation, and I think what they are talking about is a fierce passion, and they're using it for a particular kind of fierce passion. It is not, when you are working towards a cause that you see as higher than yourself. It is not about me and how wonderful I am, but I see that I'm working towards creating a vaccine that, in some ways, I feel thankful that I have the ability to work towards, and I feel that I will do a service to the whole world. Then that desire is, I would say, in Hinduism they define things Rajasic, Tamasic, so this is, and Sattvic. This would be more in the Sattvic category. It might be in the Rajasic category. They are good things, whereas, a passion where you're completely for yourself is a bad thing. when people who are working towards achievement, they achieve something really dramatic. They actually move from pride to humility. So, you know, if you look at the speeches given by Nobel Peace Prize winners, you know, every one of them by the third sentence has said, it is with great humility that I received this. Why humility? Well, because the way of achievement goes pride, humility. When you are very successful and you achieve much, you actually go to humility. And that, in my mind, is the big shortcut. You don't have to work your way into pride, which isn't helpful, it can cause all kinds of issues. When you see the reality for what it is, you can stay in humility.